is the American people in overwhelming numbers are utterly opposed to the war. And the numbers of people opposed to the war have risen to the point that we have not seen since Vietnam. In fact, this war now has even less support than the war in Vietnam did at its end. Now, stop and consider that. So, what is holding back the president? You know, Abraham Lincoln said something that people didn't understand until he's put it into action during the Civil War. He said, with public sentiment, everything is possible. Without public sentiment, nothing is possible. Well, right now, all of the people, whether it's Lindsey Graham or Tom Cotton or Chuck Schumer or whoever else on the Hill is, you know, picking up their checks from AIPAC and saying, go do this, bomb them into the Stone Age. They have no support from the American people. President Trump, if he stands up and says, that's it, we're out, I'm leaving, he has support. The American people will support that. That's what the American people want. So I fail to see what President Trump's problem is. And as we discussed at the beginning, the longer he stays, the greater the likelihood that something else will happen, that we could be dragged back into this losing proposition by the Israelis, and we end up losing more and looking even more feckless and incapable. It's time to get out. Stop this nonsense. If you look at his statement, what you just read, he's having an argument with himself in that paragraph, and he loses the argument. He says, no, I'm not going to pull any ships out until I get this and this, but I feel it's now, we have to act. The world needs this, blah, blah. Come on, President Trump, make up your mind. What in the hell are you doing? And he's struggling very clearly, unambiguously. And he doesn't need to struggle. He just needs to look at the polling data, needs to understand what the American people want, and they want out. So get out. The rest of the world wants this to end because their lives, in many cases, in many places, depend upon it. The longer he waits, the worse the depression that now seems almost inevitable is going to be. And unfortunately, the boys on Wall Street are out of touch with reality, but they'll get an education in a few weeks, especially when it becomes clear that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is about exhausted. And that's going to be true in most all the countries that we're talking about, with the exception of a very small number.
Yeah, because one of the President Trump, I don't know if he's unaware of this or if he's just blocking his eyes and saying, no, I don't see anything. I don't know. But the issue with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve was genuine and legitimate. But his comment here that their oil is gushing out, I don't know that he's unaware that that's just because of the ships that were sitting in there and they're now trying to leave, though not in as high number. But it's going to be a long time before that oil, if everything stays open, but we're still going to be using that Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Ergo, we're going to get to that economic financial point you just described already, even if the thing stays open. But if we can't get an agreement and it goes back closed, and we're going to hit that Lebanon issue here in just a second, it's going to be a real problem. But it's interesting, and there's one other headwind that goes against this for President Trump doing exactly what you suggested, and that is from the inner circle of some of his war-loving friends, one of which is a former friend of yours and mine, former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster.
There will be no enduring peace with Iran. There will be no enduring peace in the region associated with these proxies, and there will be no safety for the Iranian people until there's a fundamental change in the nature of the Iranian government, such that it rejects kind of this revolutionary ideology, and what is associated with it is this sort of permanent hostility to the United States, Israel, and its Arab neighbors. This forward defense, they call it, is really a forward offense in which they want to keep the Arab world weak by keeping it perpetually enmeshed in conflict with these sectarian civil wars, and then extend hegemonic influence to the Mediterranean, surround Israel with a ring of fire, destroy Israel, and kill all the Jews. I mean, that's really what they want to do.
So Iran really wants to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews, even though there are Jews that have been, in fact, some are even in the Iranian parliament. I don't know why they haven't been killed yet. But this permanent hostility. Why does he suppose their hostility is? Maybe it's because we've been assassinating their leaders, assassinating their generals, assassinating their scientists, and going to war with them twice in the span of about 8 months. I don't know, Doug. Maybe I'm just crazy here. What do you think?
Well, don't forget the Iraq-Iran war, which we funded,
Oh yeah, there's that.
equipped the Iraqis, and killed what, between 500 and 800,000 Iranians, depending upon what source you want to go to. Look, all he's presenting the Israeli viewpoint. I mean, Netanyahu wrote the talking points. Let's talk about reality. The reality is the Israelis are in a use it or lose it situation. For them, this is the decisive moment. If they can't keep us in this war and perpetuate this war long enough in their minds to completely and utterly destroy Iran, Israel, not Iran, it's Israel that won't exist. That's the real thing that nobody wants to admit inside the Israeli camp right now. Israel is in very bad shape. It's on fumes, as we would say. It's barely, it doesn't have much more airspeed and altitude to lose. We are all they've got. And we, from the very beginning, have been operating as a branch of the Israeli armed forces. It's no accident that all the CENTCOM commanders rush over to, pay tribute to Mr. Netanyahu and receive their instructions. That's what's been going on for some time now. That was going on for years, but it's only now becoming painfully obvious. If they can't get the United States Armed Forces to stay engaged, Israel itself may go under, because Israel is not robust. Israel has lost a lot of people. It's the people around it have had it with Israel. And he may not be aware of this. Don't waste your time talking to the so-called elites in the Emirates and these other countries that are oil installations with flags. The Muslim Arabs who live in these countries hate the elites. The Muslim Arabs that are living in the Arabian Peninsula, they hate Israel, and they hate us because we make Israel possible. This is the truth. And Iran has no long-term interest in being at war with us. And oh, by the way, no one ever mentions Turkey. And the Turks deserve honorable mention here, because the hatred there is boiling over on the stove. The hatred for Israel and the anger with us. And this is not a new phenomenon, but it is at an all-time high. And there's a fear that if we pull out, that Israel truly will be on its own. And it won't be long before the Egyptians and the Turks and the rest of the Arabs close in. No one wants to go back to the previous status quo. All of them will tell you privately, Sykes-Picot is over. That's essentially the slogan in the Arab world now. The Sykes-Picot agreement is over. You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get the Lebanese to bow down and be subjugated to Israel. It's not going to happen. So the point right now is very simple. The Israelis are going to do everything in their power to avoid any kind of agreement. They see an agreement of any kind as an existential threat to Israel. And at this point, I have to agree with them, because they've mishandled this whole thing in ways that I never thought was possible. For a group of people that are allegedly bright, they've been very, very stupid. They put themselves in a position from which they cannot get out. So the real question is not what he pointed out, which is we've got to stay there to prevent the Jews from being killed. I think the Jews know that, but that's not something that was inflicted on them. That was not the case years ago when this began, but it is now. And it's not necessarily going to be the Iranians that do it. So at this point, what can we do? We can stay permanently engaged in a war that we don't want, the world doesn't want, that's extremely destructive. Or you could have a miracle in Jerusalem, and somebody there could say it's time to completely change our government. We've got to go to a very different foreign and defense policy. Everybody who's here now, get out. We're going to start over. I don't think that's going to happen. Just as you point out, if you listen to Donald Trump, is he going to clean out the senior military and political advisors that are around him right now who've helped to deliver this disaster? I don't think so, but that's what he needs to do.
Well, it doesn't look like that there's going to be any near-term movement on that on the inside of the Israeli government. You'd mentioned this a couple of times here already. The headwind, maybe the biggest of all, is the Lebanon issue. And this was released, I guess, just yesterday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, and Northern Command Chief Rafi Milo held a conference call on Monday, and in a joint statement, they said the IDF will continue to act decisively to thwart threats to our soldiers and civilians, destroy terror infrastructure, and continue maintaining the security zone in southern Lebanon. The security of Israel's civilians and IDF troops will continue to remain before the eyes without compromise. An earlier ICC fugitive PM, this is what Dropside is referred to, Benjamin Netanyahu said, my directive and the defense minister's directive to the IDF is clear and has not changed. Our fighters in southern Lebanon have full freedom of action to thwart any direct or emerging threat to them or to the resistance of the North. The IDF has no restrictions in this matter. And tell me if you disagree, but I mean, I think that was written not to the Israeli people, but to the Oval Office and President Trump. There are no restrictions. What do you say?
Well, I think we need to disengage from the war with Iran and make it clear that we do not support the mass murder or extermination of the people that live in Lebanon, because that's effectively what you're reading. You're talking about the Gazification of Lebanon. The Israelis truly believe that they can kill their way out of this situation. They don't seem to understand that taking that position is the surest way of Israel reaching extinction. You can't kill your way out of this. And to try is to make matters worse, not better. I don't know what else to say, Dan, but if you think you're going to kill your way out of Lebanon and turn it into another Gaza, you're in for a long wait. That's not going to work.
And, there's some bigger issues. Well, it's a big issue. President Trump, in his interview with Axios a week or so ago, was point blank asked, can you tell Israel to stop in Lebanon, and will they listen? Will they agree with you? Here's
the relationship with Netanyahu's. It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane. Are you going to be able to control Israel from attacking Lebanon?
Yeah, I will be. I mean, I wonder. They have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
They do as I say. That's what he said there. Now, apparently that memo and that soundbite did not get to Itamar Ben-Gvir, who said this on that topic.
אני חושב שעם כל הכבוד לטראמפ הוא לא הסיפור. הסיפור כאן זה בנימין נתניהו. ראש ממשלת ישראל הוא ראש ממשלה עצמאי. ישראל היא לא עוד כוכב בדגל האמריקאי, וראש ממשלה צריך לקבל את ההחלטות. וזה הרבה תלוי בביבי. הוא צריך לקבל את ההחלטות שאוהבים את הנשיא טראמפ, אבל פועלים בשביל החיילים שלנו, בשביל תושבי מטולה, בשביל תושבי קריית שמונה. אין מצב שאנחנו נתחיל לפעול לפי תכתיבים של ידיד, והוא באמת ידיד גדול. צריך להגיד את זה גם.
She said, for those who may not have been able to read it, he said, hey, we love President Trump, but we're going to act the way we're going to, and we're not going to let him give us dictates. So they're going to continue on there. So what does that tell you, Doug, when you look at all this together, the claims that we're making that the Iranians have agreed to, the Iranians say, no, we haven't. Trump saying that I told Israel what to do, and Israel saying, yeah, whatever you said, we're going to do what we want to do. I mean, it seems to me that President Trump is getting shrunk further and further into irrelevance, even among the people he used to be able to tell things to.
I tell everyone that they should listen to Ben-Gvir. What he says is exactly the way the government thinks, and frankly, most Israelis think. And the expectation, though he did not state it, is that we are the servants of Greater Israel, and that we, our armed forces, will stay engaged until his view of the world is realized, Ben-Gvir's view, which is Greater Israel. That's what President Trump has to wrestle with. Can President Trump go and get a declaration of war against who? Lebanon, and for that matter, anybody else, including Iran or any other Arab country in the region, or even Turkey, to satisfy the demands of Ben-Gvir? Can he do that? Well, Ben-Gvir's attitude is we've spent 30 years buying up politicians. It's time for them to pay back. We've got the best government money can buy, and the government's being bought. End of discussion. So now it's time to pay back. If you take their money, they expect you to perform. And I think that's President Trump's problem with the Hill, to a lesser extent for himself, but he's also under duress. The people involved here, Dan, who are not under duress, they're called Americans, us. We're not under duress. And we're preeminently concerned about the interests of the American people, their strategic interests, their security interests. And they do not equate the mass murder or extinction of people living in Gaza or Lebanon or Iran, or for that matter, anywhere else, with our national security. Doesn't work for us. Now, President Trump has to decide on what side of this he really is. Is he going to be the president of the United States, or is he going to be the principal representative to the American people of Israeli and international Jewish power? That's the question.
And Doug, there's been some public polling now, but I also have it on pretty good authority that that White House does its own internal polling that's not public, and that told them even several weeks ago, pretty much what you just said there, that the general American population, even those in the MAGAverse, are starting to say, hey, this is a disaster. This war is a disaster. We should get out, and we should stop just reflexively giving in to Israel. That seems to have changed President Trump's vocabulary, things that he had been saying, because he, talking about, I tell him what to do, and they're the little partner, a bunch of stuff like that. J.D. Vance has been going off on the circuit, hitting all kinds of podcasts and other interviews, saying a lot of the same things. Well, they're just a regular country. They're not this special thing. But so far, it hasn't been any action. Do you think that they will be able to, recognizing this shift that you just pointed out, that the administration, meaning Trump, will take action to finally put some teeth behind this? Or do you think it'll stay in the realm of rhetoric and that the Israelis will continue to do what they want with our stuff?
President Trump has demonstrated pretty conclusively that he really is a politician. And most politicians like to be a little bit pregnant. And what that means is that he is predisposed to try and find a position on all sides of the issue. He is not inclined to make a decision that could prove to be in any way, shape, or form what we would recognize as decisive. Now, could this change? Yes, I think it can. But then understand, when did the French Revolution actually get underway? It got underway when the people of Paris could not afford to buy bread. So what's the tripwire? If this continues and we continue to see violence and we continue to see the oil trickle out and we continue to see the deficits in urea and sulfuric acid and aluminum and a whole host of different critical minerals, all of which come out of the Persian Gulf, we begin to see countries that are suffering with famine. We begin to see our own people that are figuring out that it's not a question of demand destruction. That's nonsense. It's supply destruction. What happened to the supply chains? Where are the things that are normally on our shelves? When this kind of thing begins to happen, the pressure will be overwhelming. Now, I'd prefer that the president not wait that long. I think it would be better for the president to act decisively now and say, that's it, we're out. And then turn to the Iranians and say, these are our interests, we're out, we respect your interests. This is how we see your interests. But that's not something that he's been trained and educated to accept. We historically as a nation were very popular in the world because we tended to respect other people's interests. When we finally became engaged in the world after World War II, when we did not return home, when we stayed all over the world, we were popular until communism was no longer a threat. And then we failed to leave. And that's when our popularity began to drop. And we should have left, but we didn't. And you have a similar situation in the Middle East right now. We can't protect these countries. The people that live there know that. We need to get out. And they need to get along with their neighbors. You and I have had these conversations in the past about Russia. The Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians would love to do to us what the Israelis have and drag us into a war that we don't need to fight against Russia. We're not going to do that, but we ought to be a little more straightforward with people and say, look, you live there, we don't. Get along with your neighbors. You know,
Right.
don't expect us to club your neighbors into position. Unfortunately, we're currently engaged in clubbing everybody into submission for Israel. It's not working. It's a catastrophe for us and for the world. I think President Trump knows that, but he's under duress. He can't simply pull the plug.